Hello and welcome to the Car Care Nut channel. Today we'll be talking about the 2013 to 2018 Toyota RAV4 and RAV4 Hybrid. We're going to be talking about common problems and things to look for. This comes from my over a decade of experience as a Toyota Master Diagnostic Technician at a Toyota dealership. So consider subscribing to the channel and let's get started. Starting with engine, we have two items to look for. One of them is an oil leak from a front timing cover. This is how you inspect this leak. This is the area of the leak. Now, although this leak is not very serious, it is very expensive to repair as partial engine disassembly. However, most of these leaks were in the later models for some reason, probably 2016 to 2018. They were more common in that year range. It's very simple to inspect. I would look at it, make sure it's not leaking. If it is, bring it up or have it fixed under warranty if the car is still under warranty, and you should have no issues. Moving on to transmission, there's two issues I'm going to talk about that you should look for. One of them is torque converter shudder. Now, that is a part that sits between the engine and the transmission. There was a software problem that causes these things to fail, and the common symptom is the car is fully warmed up, you drive it up to 40 miles an hour, and then you coast at 40 miles an hour or light acceleration, keeping it at 40 miles an hour. You'll feel eventually a vibration that shakes the whole car. As soon as you accelerate a little harder, it goes away. This was a known problem for these, especially 2013 to 2015 models, not the hybrids. This problem was addressed by Toyota. There was an extension of warranty, so when you test drive one, or if your car is doing that, make sure you watch for that. If it does, contact your local Toyota dealership and see about warranty coverage. Another issue is this one affects 2014 to 2015 RAV4 non-hybrid, gasoline only. There was a manufacturing problem with the transmission, all-wheel drive or two-wheel drive, that affected the case of the transmission. Basically, you would have a very bad transmission oil leak from the transmission. Now, there's no repair for this until you replace the whole transmission. Although most of them were caught early on when the car was newer and the transmission was replaced, some of them have escaped, and I've recently had one in the shop that was leaking and it was out of warranty, and it was a big problem to get it covered. Now, here's how you would look at the car underneath. You see this one is dry, and here's an overall picture where you should be inspecting for a leak. I mean, this leak is not hard to find. There will be red transmission fluid everywhere. Just something to watch for if you're buying a 14 or 15 RAV4 non-hybrid. Another common leak on these RAV4s is water pump. This applies both to hybrid and regular. You will see a pink streak on the hood, just like you see in this picture. It's very distinctive. If you see that line of pink colored streak, that is coolant leaking from the water pump and then getting thrown by the belt on the hood. It's very easy to see again, or the coolant level will be low. This is a very common one, especially on the gasoline models. On the early ones, 2013 to 2015. On the hybrids, we've seen some of them leak as well. It is not a very expensive thing to fix, but if you're buying one, why not check it? Buy one that doesn't have one leaking to begin with. Moving on to body, one very common thing, especially for the 2013 to 2015, are brake light bulbs. Working with Toyota, you rarely replace brake light bulbs. For some reason on these RAV4s, every year it seems like you're going through a set of brake light bulbs. They're a little harder to replace because you have to remove the whole housing, but something to look for and something to anticipate owning this car. You'll be replacing a lot of brake lights. Another thing on body is the power back door. This will not be an issue in the lower grade models like the LE. This will be more available on the XLE or the Limited. This applies to both gasoline and hybrid. I would avoid a car that's been in an accident in the back. The motors that activate the automatic back door, they've been problematic. They have a lot of issues, especially the early years, 13, 14. They're very expensive to replace and cars that has been in accidents, if the door is not sitting perfectly centered, you will have a lot of issue. I would avoid one with an accident in the rear and make sure that power door activates both open and close. And if the door doesn't open high enough, remember that there is a height adjustment. Look in your owner's manual for that. Moving on to chassis and starting with the brakes. Any RAV4 owner will tell you that the brakes are an issue on the RAV4s. They don't last as much as other cars. They actually have a very short life, and toward the end of their life they start making grinding noise and various problems with pulsation. That is just the way the car is designed. There's nothing wrong. If you drive more highway, the brakes will last, but I wouldn't expect them to last past 30,000 miles. We've seen them go out as early as 10,000 miles. So this is something to anticipate. Again, they're not expensive brakes. They're very easy to replace if you're a DIYer, but something to look out for. Another thing on brakes is when the car sits, especially when it's humid or rainy outside, you will hear a lot of noise from the rear brakes. Toyota have tried multiple things to beef up the insulation in the back and everything. I'm sorry to say, that's just the way the car is. Nothing worked. Every time it rains, you go drive the car, you'll hear a lot of grinding noise from the back. Then it goes away and everything is fine. So if that's something that bothers you, maybe consider looking for another car. Another important thing for chassis, make sure you drive the car calmly. Usually the salesman is talking about how the great car is. Focus on the car. Make sure the steering wheel is centered. Make sure it drives straight. It doesn't pull violently to any direction. We've had some issues with the RAV4s where after accidents, the subframe doesn't sit right, and it's a structural piece to the car, and then the car will never drive straight. No matter what you do, alignment, that just doesn't work. The steering is a little sensitive in these cars to accidents. We've actually had issues where the electric rack and pinion has been damaged. That's the steering component that turns your wheels. When you're driving, focus at slow speeds, focus on this turning effort. Make sure that when you turn the car left and right, you require the same effort, that is not easy on one side and hard on the other. That's another sign that you might have issues from an accident. Again, these things could get very expensive very quick, so I'd watch out for these two. And if the car hasn't been in accidents and you don't notice anything abnormal, I think you're all good. Moving on to electrical, there's only one issue with the RAV4 that always brings them into the dealership. That is the radios. Especially the early radios in 2013 to 2015. They had the pink screen syndrome that we call, when the screen turns pink. The radio works fine, just the screen has a very heavy pink shade to it. The second thing is rebooting or not even starting. This is very common, and they had issues with these radios from early on. I would make sure you check that radio thoroughly before you buy the car, or if you have one, make sure you watch for that pink. If you have an extended warranty or warranty still, watch for these things because the radios are very expensive on these cars. If you have a rebooting or a pink screen, unfortunately, there is no repair for them. You have to replace the radio at the dealership level at least, maybe some aftermarket repair facility. It's a software issue on the screen part. It's a ribbon that breaks. Nothing you can do about it from the dealership side. If there's somebody aftermarket that can fix them, I wouldn't know about that. Another thing about the radios, the later ones are much better, the 16 to 18. They're a lot better, very stable. But one thing about phones, if your radio starts rebooting on its own, if you have an older phone, that might be the issue. Every time you have an issue with these radios, the first thing you should do is restore the radio to its default settings, delete all your settings on your phone, like delete the car from your phone, and then repair everything and see if everything is resolved. This is very common in these cars. Let's talk about the RAV4 Hybrid. This is from 2016 to 2018. They're relatively problem-free. However, a few things to look for specific to the hybrid system. Now, the first thing is the high voltage battery is underneath the back seat. So if you spill water on the back seat, you have kids spilling juice, spilling things, they might actually make their way inside the high voltage battery, and that is something that would total the car. I have seen it a lot. It happens, but something to consider and watch for when you have a hybrid. Now another thing is, right underneath the back seat on either side, as soon as you open the door, you will see a little vent. Do not block that vent, because that is the cooling vent for the high voltage battery. Actually, you should check that regularly if it's lint free, clean. If it is not, there's a filter you can replace. That is something I would consider taking to the dealership for if you're not DIY. If not, maybe we'll make a future video how to do that. Now, make sure you don't cover. It's very common to see people put seat covers or blankets that block that vent. Do not do that. I mean, if you're buying one of these cars, shine a light inside that vent. Make sure it's clean and it's not all clogged, because this is the #1 cause for high voltage battery failure. Another thing is, apart from the regular maintenance on the car, the only other maintenance additional to the filters for the high voltage battery fan is the inverter coolant. This is a separate cooling system that needs the coolant replaced. That is the only additional maintenance on the hybrids. Everything else is the same as your gasoline car. Moving on to the batteries, one more thing I will tell you. Don't buy a 2016 RAV4 with 1,000 miles. Hybrids do not like to sit. That is the #1 question I get. How long is my hybrid battery gonna last? It depends how you drive the car and how you maintain those fans. Now, if the battery overheats, you're gonna shorten the life. If you don't drive the car long enough and it just sits, that battery capacity will shrink and now it's gonna fail eventually. You want to drive these cars daily, bi-daily, and long distances, so the battery would have the ability to fully charge and fully deplete and back and forth. That's the cycle of the hybrids. It's not uncommon for the dealership to see low mile cars needing a high voltage battery replacement and high mile cars that are fine. That's very common to see at the dealership. So make sure you drive those cars. I hope this video was helpful and informative for you. Please subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment below if you have a question or you have a comment. May the Lord bless you and you have a nice day.